Hi Deb, it's great to have you with us. The purpose of this short video is just to introduce you, find out a little bit more about you before we hear from you on the 4th of July and beyond, because it will be an online sermon. So, uh, Deb, could you tell us whereabout in the country you are?
At the moment, I'm sitting in a second floor flat, which is in the middle of Oxford, on one of the main streets into Oxford called St Giles.
Great, thank you. And why are you in Oxford? What do you do? Tell us about your life, work, and ministry.
Right, well, my day job, as it were, is as a lecturer in and an academic in what the trade calls Hebrew Bible, but you may well know better as Old Testament. We
Mhm.
call it Hebrew Bible to remind ourselves that the first part of the Christian Bible does actually have a separate existence on its own and has meaning in its own right, as well as the meaning that we as Christians gain from it by putting it together with the New Testament and reading it in light of the New Testament. So I find that, I mean, an important part of what I do is to try and get a hold of that meaning. And that's not to say that meanings that are uh, gained from that, from the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament by reading it through the New Testament are necessarily invalid, but they're just different from the ones that those who encountered the Hebrew scriptures uh, before the New Testament, and indeed Jesus's followers and Jesus himself, they would have had a very different impression of what those writings and traditions would have meant. And so part of what it means to be a scholar of the Hebrew Bible, of the Old Testament, is to try and access those meanings as faithfully as possible, but also to try and see what their relevance is for the present day.
So the Hebrew Bible is a huge book with lots of different genres of literature in it. Where particularly do you rest with your research interests?
I'm a bit of a generalist, and I think this is reflected in my life overall. But my particular areas of research and the things I like doing are, first of all, material to do with cult and ritual. So I spend quite a lot of time in the book of Leviticus, which you might think is unusual for a Baptist, but there we are. I've enjoyed that very much over the years. Another important area that I'm interested in and am at the moment actually editing an Oxford handbook on is the concept of gender and sexuality in the Hebrew Bible. So things like feminist readings, gendered readings, being aware of the gender dynamics that prevailed at the time of the text, and also how those might be um, read again in today's context. And then a third area of my research has been in what we call reception history. So, in other words, how um, subsequent art and literature uh, has taken up the Hebrew Bible. And in my instance, it was a case of looking how George Frederick Handel used Old Testament texts in writing a whole series of oratorios between 1732 and 1752. So looking at, the 18th century interpretation of Hebrew Bible texts within a Christian um, context and a very politicized context, and that has been fascinating. So.
Great, thank you. And that's one of the reasons we've asked you to talk about Jeremiah and invited you along was because of your particular interest around gender and sexuality. And there's some challenges within Jeremiah of some of the things we read, but don't talk about that now. We'll look forward to hearing about that later. Um, there's other elements to what you do in Oxford, perhaps indicated that you're not dressed in a particular academic way today. Would you like to tell us about that?
Yeah. Um, well, Although my day job is an academic, I do feel very strongly that I have a vocation as a Christian minister. And the main expression of that at the moment, I think, is as chaplain to the Oxford United Women's Football Club, who are actually
Excellent.
doing pretty well in the women's football pyramid, as they call it. They're kind of on the cusp of moving up into the tier two, which and if you think that during the lockdown there were 6 tiers in the pyramid, and tiers 1 and 2 were allowed to keep playing, whereas tiers 3 and below were not. And I say Oxford is knocking on the door of tier 2, so hopefully next year we'll be able to get promotion. But yeah, so that's what I do. And this shirt was my end of season gift from the girls, for kind of being there for them. Really, that's largely what it's about. It's being there as a support, as a sympathetic ear, as a friendly presence, and just so that they know that I'm there. Um, and if they ever want to talk about anything, then they can do. So
That's great. Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us and for coming and being part of Chapel A's virtual offering of worship and to enlighten the scriptures and help us understand more of how we might interpret them today, or how we might listen to them. I think it's fair to say, as we've gone through Jeremiah, it's been a challenge. It's there's lots going on for Jeremiah, and there's lots going on for us in the world. So it's been a really brilliant book for us to look at, but one that has, particularly those of us who've been involved in the preaching, it really has stretched us. So we're really looking forward to hearing from you, and thank you. And we'll see you on the 4th, and look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
yeah, I'll be there. Maybe not in person, but I will be there. Great. Thank you very
Great.
much for the invitation.